Второй день конференции «Архитектор будущего». У нас сегодня с вами очень интенсивная программа. Я немного расскажу, чтобы у вас сложилась цельная картинка этого дня. Впереди у нас небольшая панель с рассказами от 4 очень молодых и активных архитекторов, которые смогли к своим около 30 годам построить какую-то невероятную и нестандартную карьеру.
An outstanding career, and also we're facing a meeting with Dabaj and Ricardo Luca Conti, who will be telling about how they created a non-for-profit bureau in London, how they work in Lebanon, and other not-so-easy contexts. Also, we're going to have the award ceremony, the ceremony of awards from Abdel and Strelka, and you will see the finalists, and most importantly, find out who are the first winners. You'll find that out. And also, Kulapat Yantrasast will close today's ceremony. He's the founder of the Y Bureau. He built over 50 galleries globally, and he'll be telling about his approach to designing cultural spaces, and he'll be talking about why cultural diversity is so important. Good evening, everybody. I would like to say a few things about what will be happening in the upcoming session. It goes without saying that education today gives so many different routes, so many ways to take to young architects. They can go abroad, they can invent, they can design, they can create video games, or do architecture, believe it or not. And today, 4 young and ambitious architects will tell about how they made the steps on their journey, and they will tell about how they were able to make sense in the ever-changing context, be it traditional education or architectural bureau. The first speaker is Daria Nasonova. She's the architect and the indie games developer, and also an architect, yes. And in her video games, she puts together different contexts, starting with neo-Marxism to physical spaces which actually exist in Moscow. Also, we're going to have 4 brief presentations, and after that, we'll invite every speaker on stage so that you will be able to ask your questions. So please prepare your questions, and a round of applause for Daria Nasonova. Please welcome. Hi, everybody. My name is Dasha. And I am an architect, but also I do game design. But before telling about myself, about how I approach this, I'd like to give you a brief context of what I've been doing. As far as I believe, architecture and game design are actually very similar disciplines. Maybe it's even the same, but usually when they speak about architecture and video games, they right away imagine actual architecture, meaning buildings designed in video games. But that's actually a different kind of thing, because even 2D video games are also the representation of architecture, because we arrange space in a certain way and build a narrative which game designers or architects build into the space. More often than not, young architects choose the way of simply becoming game designers. For example, this is the video games on the left called Sable. It's been designed by the graduate of Bartlett Architecture School. Commonhood and other video games designed by the graduate and the professor of Bartlett game architecture school. The recent indie game hit Witness was designed by actual architects, and particularly landscape architects. And in addition to practices, in addition to game design, there's also theory in addition to practice. So there's this meta-discipline titled game studies. It includes so many different domains that study game design from different angles, including sociology, cultural studies, philosophy, sociology, and the significant partition of game studies is studying of connection between video games and architecture. There's an entire online magazine. It's titled Heterotopias, and it analyzes the architecture of analysis of architecture in video games from the point of view of different architectural schools and works of different great architects. So the question 1 in this domain of game studies is how video games change the perception of physical space by living and breathing humans, and how video games can become experimental things think tanks for architects. So you don't have to build anything in physical reality. Instead, you can just reproduce that reality and your ideas in virtual reality. So as far as the first question goes, how video games build our perception of reality, we can use this beautiful grabber of Asher to illustrate the answer to the question. So you see the reflection that becomes secondary to the original, and then the reflection and the original switch positions. So previously, game designers relied on physical reality. Now, the process works vice versa. Virtual reality actually dictates conditions for design in the real life. As far as architecture as experimental think tank, this is also kind of fruitful direction to work in. If we look at the landscapes in contemporary video games, you can see that there are actual references to paper architecture, classical, and also the works of Archigram and Archistudio from the 60s. As far as my personal story, as far as it goes, I was very much inspired by Cedric Price, because as far as I believe, his Fun Palace project in many ways was one of the preliminary sandbox for even online games, because in his Fun Palace project from the 60s, Cedric Palace suggested the procedurally generated space, and also it's a self-teaching space. Cedric Price described his project in a way very similarly to the way gameplay is based in contemporary sandbox games, such as Minecraft, when people go to some free space and modify it according to their own needs and willingness. And this kind of project was an inspiration for me to go into game design. And it all began in here at Strelka, because a few years ago, I believe that was 2014, there was an event here dedicated to video games and gamification in general. And I show there a beautiful film called Indie Game the Movie, telling about small teams of architects and game designers, one-man team, two-man teams, create video games. And there were a few indie game hits there, such as Super Meat Boy and Fast there. And I was very much inspired by the fact that just one or two people can create these kind of worlds in games. And that completely turned my perception upside down. So I realized that one little person can make a game. You don't have to put together a team of 50 people. And I decided to try and do that myself. And by today, I designed actually 5 games. Some of them remained at the level of prototype, but some are still ongoing work in progress. Another big project I cannot announce, unfortunately, but I will tell about it briefly later on. So, my graduation project at Moscow Architecture Institute was dedicated to the reconstruction of the old Soviet factory. That was a project about transitioning the factory into the university campus, research campus. And I decided to make entire project into the game field. I changed the graphics, I integrated NPCs there, and I actually invented this main character who is a first-year student of this tech university. And let me show you the video. When I was a first-year student, I could walk, being a character, a first-year student in the framework of an RPG game, this character could walk around, talk to other students and professors, and research the space. So I wanted to build a certain degree of interactivity into the standard architecture project, which usually presumes just designs and models which nobody could interact with. Another project that I was making, I'm about to show it. Next project that I was doing is more reactionary, because it's dedicated to Taganskaya power station, because this monument of constructivism was under the threat of demolition in the 60s, and unfortunately, eventually it was demolished. And as any other representative of architecture community, I was super sad about it, and I decided to design something like an educational info video game. based on the building. So I invented this main character who is supposed to protect the Tatlin Tower against some postmodernist monsters, which were kind of an image of the Lushkov era of the Moscow architecture. Lushkov was a former mayor of Moscow, so kind of a postmodernist monsters attacking Shukov Tower with ionic capitals. So this is a gameplay process showing that this is just a clone of the Defender of the Galaxy, but even though you cannot win, you still should try to preserve the monuments of constructivist heritage. So this is one of the more or less architectural games that I actually designed, because my other games are more related to philosophy. For example, Philosophy Hammer is a video game that is inspired by The Dawn of Gods by Nietzsche, where he criticizes the philosophy of the new era, which instead of fully destroying and rejecting religious idols, instead created new idols based on patriotism, democracy, romanticism, or other cultural streams. So I decided to embody this concept in a framework of the game arcade, where Nietzsche just runs around and uses philosophy hammer to destroy those idols. So this is just kind of a game that is meant to, a trinket that is meant to get people introduced to the Nietzsche's philosophy concepts. Another game that I've been designing for quite a long time, it's also dedicated to philosophy, it's called Adagio. Adagio is the name of the book of Erasmus from Notre Dame. It is a philosopher of the Renaissance, where he put together the sayings of the ancient Roman and Greek philosophers. And I wanted to make kind of a humor game, a funny game that would again introduce people to philosophy, showing that philosophy is not as boring as it usually traditionally seems to be, because I suffered when I had to pass my philosophy examination, and I decided that this kind of journey should be sweetened up. So I decided that this entire philosophic journey should be more creative, where the cognitive process and process of being introduced to new philosophic concept should come through fighting with different philosophers. Entire gameplay is tied to kind of a turn-based fighting, where every phrase of a philosopher becomes a certain kind of visual image. If, for example, Freud is talking about childish nightmares, the main character is attacked by childish nightmares. If the main character is fighting to Marxism, then Marx attacks the main character with the Lenin train and an army of the workers. So this was supposed to be a super imaginary game which would develop explain philosophy concepts with all kinds of evocative and expressive visual imagery. Another game that I finalized only recently, it's a hands-on urbanist game. It's not as imaginary as the previous ones that I have shown. So this game is meant to be more kind of a useful tool. And I selected a plot next to my house, and it's a very problematic plot because nothing is there, it's abandoned, there's no construction there, and I thought that I could suggest to the residents of the surrounding neighborhood the range of ideas of what they could do with this plot. So the person first studies the problematics of the plot, so that the person is getting introduced to the context, and then the person can drag and drop the elements of a functional models into the plot. So by the end of the game, the gamer gets a functional model of what could be happening at the plot. So the gamer actually puts it together, and then it is possible to look at different functional models created by different gamers, by different players, so that architects can get a brief not just based on imagination or personal point of view, but this actually is based on actual demands of the residents of the neighborhood. So, according to my idea, you could scale the game depending on the size of the plot. And in addition to functional zones, you can put benches, parking elements, recreation elements, all kinds of functional elements. So, therefore, I have this practical part and another big project that I cannot be talking about, but it actually led me to game design. And in addition, I'm very curious about theory. I really do want to understand how this new generation, brought up by video games, sees reality differently, specifically architecture. And I actually host a blog where I try to translate articles, write my own articles, and tell about what is happening in the world of architecture in direct connection to the video games. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dasha, once again. And now, please welcome on stage another great graduate of Strelka 2018, an architect, an artist, and designer, Katya Bryskina. Katya will tell us about her creating new methods of construction with robots and artificial intelligence. And you can see the product of this experience right there in the corner. This small installation, it's created from wood as a result of a 5-day workshop that has just ended. It was part of our conference too, so please welcome Katya. Hello everyone, my name is Katya Bryskina. For the past few years, I've been focusing on construction work with robotics, researching biomaterials, sometimes their principles, and sometimes I grow the materials themselves, and I'm interested in the bigger city systems. As for now, I mostly focus on my startup. It's devoted to the growth of biomaterials, but I also collaborate with an architectural studio that focuses on 3D modeling from biomaterials. I studied in Russia to be an architect. I worked in Tel Aviv for 4 years, and simultaneously, I've always been doing art and installations with glass, mostly as the main material. And I was looking for the discipline where I could use all my background, my whole background. It brought me to the Architectural Association. I studied at the Emergent Technologies and Design program. And as for my graduate project, it was devoted to a multi-robotic construction system for 3D printing in clay. Why multi-robot system? Well, the answer is quite easy. To print a bigger building, it's better to design a system of smaller robots rather than to try to do it with one single huge robot. Why do we use clay as the main material? Because we are researching eco-friendly materials, reusable materials, and we are also interested in new formats of work with dry and wet materials. This is an example of Harvard research when a number of smaller robots that do something together and then understand what's happening. When the lamp is green, I do this. When the lamp is blue, I do this. So the robots are easy to replace, and it works like a big biosystem of turbines. This is the diagram of our project. Specifically, we have 4 types of robots. One of them we use for print, one to depose the materials, because as for 3D printing, mostly we use toxic materials, and to use natural organic materials, we need to build a foundation for the layers not to be deformed. The third kind of robots, they prepare the materials for printing, and drones, top-down and bottom-up. We use both strategies, top-down and bottom-up. So on the one hand, we design the structure, on the other hand, the drone uses the computer simulation to redistribute the work in between the robots, judging by which robot is closer to the site, which of them have enough fuel, and so on and so forth. So no need for a human here. And also this drone can scan what is ready and where some work needs to be done. This is the initial calculation of how much time we need And as for the basic materials, the foundation, we can use it as a system for a few materials. The third layer, so we have the main printed body work, we have lath work or timbering, and we also have the part injected into the casing. Surely we did prototyping with robotic arms, and we scanned the first two printed layers to produce the third. One of the examples where clay is already used for construction work, and why we need this fishnet, because here in the picture all the people are hiding under the trees to find some shadow, because the houses don't have any ventilation, they're made out of clay only. So we can use this knowledge of vernacular architecture to print similar thick walls. Well, the basic construction is a bit different. The structure is porous. So these are the clusters that we get as a result. At the end of this research, I was sure that I was going to keep working with robotics. But then I realized that the problem lay within the material. So we can do whatever we want, but we still keep using the old materials. So I went on to research mycelium. It was the beginning of my startup. My startup focuses on growing organic material from mycelium. They are biodegradable polymer with a lot of chitin in it. So we can also make it more resistant, because we can grow the number of chitin, and it's very ecologically friendly as a process. Here are some of the initial testing we did. It's our strategy still to grow a huge amount of the materials. We actually differ from all the other startups because we work with panels and later deform them. So first we don't grow the forms initially because we want to take as little space as possible. So we grow leaves first and then cut them into the right form. This is a more arty, I would say, part of my startup. We also research the material itself, how we can interact with it, how we can work with it, and we also research the process of it in the light of architectural design project. This project has been presented in New Holland 2 months ago. It was a month of the incubator functioned for a month, and people could interact with the installation by changing the color. It was quite an interesting experience. Now I work on a bigger exhibition with the same idea. This is a different side project, but it also works with chitin. So we work, one and the same material can be either soft or very rigid. It depends on the inner structure of it, on the filaments in it. So we use latex. Depending on the pattern that we impose on it, we can experiment with different structures that we can get as a result of the production process. It was presented at the Architectural Association. This is a transition to bigger systems. It's a project that we focused on in the framework of the New Normal project here at Strelka. So here we designed software engineering, how software can detect different kinds of information. We tested different scenarios, and we can understand which one is better for this site in particular. and we can redesign them, recode them accordingly. We worked with Moscow City, the new kind of business and office center, because it needs to be botified already, although the construction process is not over yet. It led me to the biggest project I now work on, inhalable matter.
Мы смотрим, что делать с существующими urban clusterами.
Here we try to analyze what can be done with the existing urban clusters. It's much easier to upload new software on your phone than to update the city you live in. That's why we keep living in the same buildings that some other people lived in 50 years ago, 100 years ago. As a new Leo, we try to insert nature into the urban environment. That is why we think about the biological matters, how they work, what processes happen in nature. And as a response, we want to build this kind of multi-layered structures. Different layers will function differently, and the whole system will also give feedback to the humans. So it means that, again, we will use both soft and rigid patterns that will fight for our cities in the future. And this could be applied to city clusters. And as a result of my work, I love sharing my knowledge and my experience. And this photo was taken at a workshop which we did together with Strelka in St. Petersburg, where we experimented more with machines and industrial tools. So we had only 2 days just to see what can be done with these tools. This is the workshop that we've done here, building with biomaterials. On the one hand, it can be quite synthetic and cold, but in our case, for us it's more organic, imperfect, natural. And we think it has a totally different aesthetic. Something imperfect meets extremely perfect robots. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, Катя. Дальше я бы хотела пригласить на сцену
Tatyana
Knoroz, которая сменила... Такая отличная группа поддержки, которая сменила свою деятельность в архитектурном бюро в Японии на исследовательскую и предпочла изучение японского массового жилья, так называемого у нас хрущевки, и даже изобрела свой собственный исследовательский метод. Так что поприветствуем Татьяну.
So let's welcome Tatyana.
Good evening. My name is Tatyana Knoroz, and today I will share with you the story of how I moved to live in Japan and became the researcher of Japanese architecture. In the recent 5 years, I've been living in 3 different cities, and I graduated from the bachelor and began my master's degree in Milan Polytechnic University. Then I moved to work in Tokyo for 1 year in the framework of exchange program, and now I'm the researching student in Kyoto University. I'm going to write my PhD there next year. Why have I begun with Milan? Why have I begun with Milan? I realized that I wanted to be an architect lately, at the end of my high school years. And I always wanted to go and try studying in Europe. And I wanted to do that for free, but Milano Polytechnic University is the only university in Europe where you can actually study architecture in English for free, and at the same time you can actually get scholarship no matter what citizenship you have. I learned a lot there, but most importantly, I got detox from the post-Soviet educational tradition that we have in Moscow, and I encountered very fruitful atmosphere to interact with students and professors. And of course, Polytechnic, Milano Polytechnic has its own ideology, and there are 3 main ideas that still move me in that ideology. First of all, we want to save the planet, And that's why we should stop constructing and begin renovating. And if we want to renovate, we should pay more attention to the architecture of interiors. It's not any easier than traditional architecture. This is something that I'm going to do. And for all of those things, you should work at the constant conjunction of disciplines. And now I work in a project where I have to learn anthropology, knew about politics, do filmmaking, etc. And by the end of my third year, I actually began experiencing some doubts about Europe. I thought that they're too self-centered on themselves, on their culture, on logics, whether it's necessary or not. And in Italy, frankly, it's very hard to find a job as an architect for some decent payment. And all of my classmates began stressing, searching for a perfect portfolio, and I decided that it's time to leave the scene. I finished my internship in Italy, and I decided that I would rather do theory than practice. I decided to move to Japan, that was my plan, and see the architecture from a different angle. I wanted to build in my head this kind of a theory of everything, and for that I had this plan to move for a long time, for free, and get support, financial support. So I suggested a research idea that's interesting to everybody in Japan. That is the renovation of the housing that was built, residential housing that was built after the war. I wanted to work with ordinary people and study residential housing as the object that for me is the beginning of architecture. And I want to find answers to global questions, and that's why I picked particularly this issue. And I suggested this research project. It was embraced by everybody. They sent me to Tokyo. I come to Tokyo University of Arts, and that's what I believe, that everything is going to be fine. But that's actually not the way it began. So in Japan, as a matter of fact, everything works completely differently. And I had to first learn a few lessons to launch my project. First of all, I was in a university where everything works in this lab kind of system. So there is a lab of 10 to 12 students, and it's run by a famous architect who is the professor. And if you're outside of the lab system, if you cannot reach harmony, interaction with all of the members of the lab, and do not work in the framework of a lab hierarchy, you will never get a successful career in Japan. But when I got into the lab, I initially began to promote my project right away, and I see that something doesn't work. Everybody was super bored with my lab. For some reason, everybody's super bored, and everybody's saying me that actually they're doing some abstract ideas. They want to build Ishigami cloud buildings, they want to do this inflatable tea rooms, but social residential housing is not our thing. I've been fighting with them for 2 months, trying to prove myself and my point of view, but I realized if I want to learn something in Japan, I have to embrace, I have to accept, I have to be humble, and humility is my way to go. So I thought, what should I do? I pronounced scenic design, and I pronounced it, and the next day they offered me internship in a very interesting bureau, Atsushi Higiwara architect, very famous in Japan, but not very famous in Europe. He built, for example, Japanese Pavilion at Milan World Expo in 2015. Kitagawara gives me individual assignment, and he says that the friend of his is going to build a scene, a stage for Japanese mass theater. And of course, I was pumped up about this idea. I began visiting every show, reading papers. In 2 weeks, I became expert on this theater thing in Japan. And actually, I submit the first stage of the project 2 weeks before the deadline. It's not that they encouraged me. They actually moved all of my deadlines 2 weeks earlier, or even a month earlier, without giving me any raise. And I realized that in Japan, it's important to work longer instead of efficiently. And this thing actually works in my life still in Japan. In addition, at the next stages of the project, I realized that people don't care much about the practical side of it and the simplicity of ideas. They more want to see aesthetic sense of the project. So I was trying to make it as quickly and as cheaply as possible, but every time I approach the main architect, he asks me questions about the project, and I'm thinking, well, I explained everything, things seem to be fine, but they ask me, so you're going to redo everything the next week? I don't understand why, but actually I realized that if they ask me questions, I don't have to rationally explain what's happening.
from a logical standpoint. Everybody just wants Japanese tradition, minimalism, and beauty. So it's for you to judge. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but in addition to the fact that it's simple, actually has been pulling back and forwards with the main architect fighting for every single detail. That's lots of effort, but client loves that. That's what matters. And conclusion number 5 from Tokyo. Conclusion from the story of how we were building the hyperbolic sculpture of concrete 3 meters high together with my classmates. So we needed to dig a hole for the fundament, for a foundation, and after digging, when we began digging, so we've been digging for a week, and then we discover a pipeline, a water pipeline, and we realized they have to, extinguish the hole. Then so we move 5 meters away and dig another hole. So I suggest, why don't we plan the digging? Maybe we build a plan, calculate, use the materials, but Japanese are saying, well, that's a good idea, but let's keep on digging. And they keep on digging, and I'm thinking, probably we should be digging, and then the security guy comes. We just dug half of the hole, and the security guy tells us that we cannot dig here because truck drives here. The trucks go here. So we're moving to dig another hole. I'm thinking it's stupid, I should go back to Italy. But then I realized that for me, this was the most valuable lesson, because even though it was long and inefficient, Japanese sustained perfect harmony in the group. Nobody was giving orders. They were all learning from their mistakes. And I believe that for me that was the most valuable lesson to cherish. Tokyo provides you with exceptional opportunities to everybody who is interested in architecture. We have been constantly visiting construction sites, biggest objects. I visited the best and the biggest architecture bureaus in Japan, thanks to the system of context. But to me, Tokyo was too stressful as a city, and I could not work on my subject there, so I decided to move to a different location. I applied for a second exchange program, more serious, research-based exchange programs with better financing from my university in Milano and in Kyoto University, and that went very smoothly. That was the best research university in Japan, and I actually got lucky with my supervisor, and I knew how to establish this contact thing in Japan, and my research with the Japanese residential housing actually picked up very quickly. I discovered very cool internship at RID, Research for Architecture Domain Bureau, and there were 4 architects doing consulting there. I mean, they just do architecture research in their leisure time, practically, and every year they take a few interns, and this year we've been doing architecture in society, and my residential housing was perfect as a theme. I found a beautiful case study. I was talking to Japanese who live in those apartments, because it's very hard to gain trust of the Japanese, but my translators and new friends helped me, and the biggest problem was that residents would never accept in the interview that they feel bad, they don't have elevators, they don't have hot water, but they will never say it. That's why I had to discover this new research method. I titled it Deviceology. I don't have to talk to people there. I can just look at images, go to places and find devices, discover devices that people create to adapt to this hardships of living in this standardized housing. And those devices are actually repeating themselves as certain types, a certain kind of typology. So those devices highlight that it's inconvenient to live in these spaces, and this device also highlight the reasons for inconveniences, and I try to describe it in my thesis, in my PhD, and those discoveries can actually be used in global typology for standardized housing. I also host a blog called konukoma.com about this types of residential housing and about my adventures and endeavors. I also make a documentary about people living in those poor residential housing. I also make a theoretical article, white paper for magazine to actually enter the next stage of my PhD better next year. And if you're curious about knowing more about Japanese obsolete residential housing, I'm also hosting a range of lectures in the Multimedia Art Museum, and I'll be reading a few lectures starting next Sunday. Maybe my life hacks for Japan are not useful to everybody, so I had to move from Tokyo to Kyoto. I had to embrace the system of work to quickly doesn't try to optimize everything, but maybe that will not work for you personally. Still, it's my personal experience. And if you are curious, if you want to try yourself in Japan, I actually listed the internships that you can go for in Japan. I will also publish this in my Telegram channel. So all of these internships have not been tested by me personally, but this is based on my friends and acquaintances' experiences, and there's also this beautiful Max scholarship, which is really a pleasurable thing. It's also valid not for architects, but for other professions. You can apply for it with the Japanese embassy. Thank you, Arigato, for your attention. Hopefully you'll ask lots of questions after all. You guys are here on everybody's mercy for questions from the audience. So I will ask my question then, from the questions that were sent in advance. So there was a question. Do you think it's necessary to look for some big-name architecture bureau for your initial internship, or you should concentrate on some minor bureaus where you can actually experience more details of the process and concentrate on some intricate local projects that you would probably actually fulfill, which is not available in a big bureau. You will where you will do just paperwork. Okay, I want to begin. It's different kinds of approaches, different kinds of thinking. It's everybody's way. On the one hand, big name opens certain doors, but on the other hand, it's more of a participation in some big machine so that you lose your individuality. So this may be a good step, but personally, I would not, get stuck in there for too long. Is there anybody brave who wants to ask a question? Oh, there I see the question. Hi there. Question to Yekaterina. Could you please tell in more detail? You said you did glass and installation, and then that led to EISO. So what were you looking there? Thank you. Initially, I had architectural education and I was working in Tel Aviv. And I began with internship, and then I became the leading architect in the end. But I lacked working with technology and biology and experiment. That's why I chose my program at the conjunction of those elements.
Feel free to add something if you would like to the previous question or the question before that.
Yeah, can I add something to the first question, which, if I understood, was about picking a star architect versus or a small office. Obviously, I think I'm a bit biased because I had myself quite a positive experience working in a big firm. But I would say working in a big firm that is not a celebrity architecture firm might be the best thing for your first 2 years, even though it kind of feels like it's against the common sense. Because actually understanding the architecture as a profession, architecture as a business, I think is actually quite important for young practitioners, given the fact that a lot of our models as kind of young aspiring architects are based on people who kind of do architecture a bit like a hobby, because they're rich from something else and they can afford to make one project every 16 years, and therefore it kind of produces the wrong sense of what we're actually meant to do as urban professionals. We have to think about the idea that projects have to be done on time, done for people who use the buildings, and sometimes working for people who don't have a big ego might be a better thing, at least to start off your career. And then after 2 years in a big practice, if you move to a smaller practice, then you have much more responsibility because you've actually learned how architecture actually functions.
Вы хотите что-то добавить к предыдущему вопросу или предыдущему вопросу?
Do you want to add something to the previous question? Yes? No? Okay, next question then.
У кого-то микрофон.
Anybody else want to answer? Yes, please, welcome.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Данила. Hi, my name is Danila, and the question is to Daria. How video games help you to analyze complex systems? For example, there is a game called Mega Gear. One of the elements of the gameplay there is using fourth dimension. Could you, with a video game, change the perception and understanding of certain complex things so that it becomes much more convenient to understand them? Yes, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I do not have a ready-made answer for you, but video games have this potential for informal and not obtrusive way to deliver important messages to people. So, if you want to change perception via a video game, I believe game design is a way to go. It's a perfect tool. So instead of doing teachings, annoying teachings, you can make an intricate, well thought out video game so that the person would be able to learn the principles that you want to convey through a pleasurable gameplay. So it's more of an educational question. I believe that video games have very strong educational potential, like the Mega Cure game that you just mentioned. It's much better than
Добрый день, меня зовут Марина, и я хотела бы спросить,
My name is Marina. I wanted to know about the future. So, can you compare the importance, the significance of practical architecture as opposed to research in the future? What will be more important, practical architecture or architectural research in the future? I can say about Japan. Research is essential, very timely, because Japanese system of construction is very bulky, lots of inertia there. For example, the big problem with my project is that all of the significant architecture bureau in Japan, all of the developers in Japan believe that renovation is still not awesome. They want to build new stuff, but at the governmental level, it's clear that there's no money anymore. So this is a very bulky machine. And now there are these processes happening at the university so that they would launch renovation to help those people that you saw in my pictures. So I believe that in Japanese case, researching is very important. It's essential today. Nicolay, what's your opinion?
I think I can also answer because given the fact that we run a very research-heavy program here at Strelka, I think absolutely research is probably 80% and 20% practice, I would say, especially for a young practitioner, given the fact that we have a lot of inherent common sense things that feel like they are practical, and research feels a bit impractical, whereas in fact, it's actually completely the opposite. We are doing things in a way that's actually completely crazy, even though it seems reasonable, because we're inheriting old habits because of lack of research. Because some things, such as the construction of roads, seems to be figured out, the construction of buildings, the renovation, a lot of these things are up for reinvention, because in the same way that we've been trained with the technologies of a previous decade, of a previous century. Right now, technologies such as growing buildings, such as tracking again digital twins from the model to the building and so forth. There's so much opportunity in misusing technology. So not knowing the right way to use it, but actually discovering wrong ways that actually become the right ways of using it differently. So in that case, research is absolutely essential, and I think every serious professional should dedicate 80% of their time to think about these things truly.
Thank you. У нас есть еще время на буквально
We have time for one or two questions more, so please raise your hand.
Да, вот там, да.
Good day, my name is Anya, and I wanted to ask a question to Tatyana. You mentioned actually the documentary that you're making while you're doing the research, and the question is about whether there will be a way to see the film in the future at some festivals, or you're going to publish it online perhaps. So why you chose a documentary as one of the research tools, by the way? Thank you for the question. I'm making a movie because field research, especially in Japan,
is very hard to draw or depict. It's hard to explain what I'm doing if I'm just talking for hours with grandparents. And many things that they tell me probably might be lost in translation if I just retell them. And again, they might just not believe me. So I have to, have some evidence that they're saying what they're saying. And again, I have to process 80% of the movie to translate it into English from Japanese. So I will show the teaser at my third lecture in MoMA, Moscow Multimedia Art Museum, at the end of September, at my third lecture. And by winter time, I hope that it will be the fully cut version of the movie. I will publish it on my website and on my Telegram channel. Thank you so much. There's a question from previously submitted ones, maybe to everybody of our participants today, so please briefly answer this question. Now you are doing architecture, but also work in different domains. And in the near future, you probably might switch to something else. So can you describe your vision of future architecture, the trends which are up and coming, and maybe will become even more popular in the future decade? Maybe Dasha, you begin. I believe that, first and foremost, in the upcoming years, architecture will not be seen as construction per se. There will be a broader vision of architecture, so that we will be able to call architecture absolutely anything, from cinematography to writing of articles and game design. So there will be lots of interdisciplinary experts who will be enriching the notion of architecture with their research, with their practices, with their work. That's it for me. Katya, how about you? I believe in the organic buildings that grow, transform, and again, that's a more plastic system. There's no this rigid skeleton, and I believe that. And this is very plastic. You can change it, you can update it, you can transform it. And in essence, all of this is based on certain biological principles. It's adaptable to what we need, and this is the ongoing generative process that never stops. Thank you.
I think for me it would be that architects will be responsible not for the design of the object as a finished thing, but for the whole life cycle of a building, which means the materials before they became architecture. So a tree in a forest is architecture before it's cut, and also after the life cycle, as the building becomes disassembled and recycled. This is also a continuation of the architecture project. So architects will find ways to actually be responsible for the whole life cycle of the built environment.
Thank you.
In the recent years, I've been mostly working in the academic environment, and this is the only domain that I could talk about. I believe that in Italy and in Japan, researchers mostly try to go back into the field. We go back to the ground. Because in postmodernism, we've been doing lots of abstract theory, but now people understand that architecture is really deprived of some real life communication. There's so much sociology and psychology integrated into actual architecture. Guys, thank you so much for the answers. All of them are available here, and we are going to be having now a brief intermission of about 10 minutes. First of all, let us thank the guys for their inspiration with a round of applause. Thank you so much. And we have a brief 10 minutes intermission. Let me let you know that we have consultancy centers for Architectory RF, and you can ask there about the upcoming program of education. And also we're going to be seeing you again in 10 minutes to speak with John Dabaj and Ricardo Conti about how they create their bureau, non-commercial bureau, and how they work in different.
Okay, we're going to continue our conference now. And our next guests, Joana Dabaj and Ricardo Luca Conti, they arrived here with the help of the company Lifecycle, and they're going to tell us today how they managed to create a non-for-profit organization in London, and they focus on working with socially disadvantaged groups of people. We will talk about where they find financing and ideas and just the moral strength to keep doing what they do. So, John, Ricardo, The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, thanks for the invitation. We're really happy to be here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our story and how and why we decided to set up as a non-for-profit design studio. And then we're going to talk about our approach, and then we're going to give an example of two projects, one that we completed in 2016, and then a most recent project. So CatalyticAction actually started as an idea. It was me, Joana, and another colleague from University College London. And what we wanted to do and understand was how architecture can be used as a tool to empower communities. And in particular, in our work, we were looking at vulnerable communities. So we had this idea, but how then do you translate this idea into practice? So what we did was to work with local partners and other experts. In particular, we were working in Lebanon to understand the specific needs that were present in the context where we were working. And we also worked with the local community to understand even further these needs. And then it was our role as architects and designers to try to translate these needs into design solutions that could answer the specificities of the context.
So Lebanon is a very small country in the Middle East, for who doesn't know it. It hosts a high number of Syrian refugees who fled the war in the neighboring Syria since 2011, when the Syrian civil war started. As a Lebanese and Syrian, I saw the impact of displacement on the communities and on the built environment. Syrian refugees in Lebanon, a high number of them, live in informal tented settlements. So basically tents, as you see in the picture here. And when we visited a number of these informal tented settlements with our local partners, we saw the very urgent need for children to have spaces, safe spaces to play and to grow. In order to understand the specific needs of the children, we conducted the participatory assessment, as you see in the first picture, where we hear from the children about their aspiration and their visions. And we also did lots of observation of the existing play practices. So as Ricardo said, we were just like freshly graduating from our master's degree in the University College of London. And the only way to fund for this project was to create a crowdfunding campaign that we launched online. And we successfully managed to collect the amounts in order to be able to build the project. It was really happened just because of the support of many people who believe that all children have the right to play. Once we collected the money, we moved to the community engaged construction phase that happened with the local people and with the children themselves who saw the project from its inception to its completion. As you see here, children participated in different activities such as painting, whatever was safe for them to participate, such as painting, planting, creating seating, and the result was, next. The result was a playground that served more than 300 children and is still functioning until today. And we named the project Ibtasim, which means in Arabic, smile. So the most important impact for us was seeing these children in a very engaging and safe environment, and just seeing them smile was like a really important impact for us.
Okay, so that was briefly the story of our first project. And so after we completed it, luckily it was a successful project and was being published, and we were receiving more requests to do more projects from other NGOs working in Lebanon. And so at that point, we felt it was necessary to define better who we were and who we are today. And so define what approach do we want to use for the future projects, and also what values do we want to follow in all the projects that were upcoming. So firstly, the approach that we define is made by 3 phases. So there was a participatory planning phase that we also did in the pilot project, in which the community is highly involved, and we do a set of exercises to understand the aspirations and the needs of the community. And then there is a sustainable design phase, which is, like more the design phase that we all know. And then the community engaged construction, where we involve the community in the building process. And these phases are not like a linear process. Sometimes we go back to another phase. So let's say we're doing design, we come up with some ideas, but we still feel we want to test these ideas with the community. So we will go back to the community, do another participatory assessment, and see the reaction of the community, and then either confirm the design or adjust it accordingly. And as I mentioned, we also developed a set of values that are really important. So these values are revealing and valorizing community knowledge, culture, needs, visions, aspirations, and skills, transferring context-appropriate technology, skills, and innovative design solutions, supporting local businesses by prioritizing the use of local materials and labor, transferring participatory tools for just decision-making processes, generating livelihood opportunities, and enabling equal engagement. So we're going to see these values basically implemented in practice in the projects that we're going to present today. Some will be clear to spot, others maybe a bit less, but they're all there in our projects. So the first project we're going to talk about is a project that was completed in 2016. So the year after we completed the pilot project, we had the great opportunity to work on a school project this time. And, it doesn't show much. So the story of this project actually started in Milano, at the Expo of Milan in 2015, where Save the Children had a pavilion. And after the Expo was over, Save the Children decided that they want to reuse the materials for a humanitarian purpose. So the project is really like a result of multiple partnerships. So there was, on one side, Save the Children wanted to donate the materials. Then we were working with a local partner in Lebanon who runs educational programs for Syrian refugees. So they were also involved in the project. And we worked with Arup engineering firm to do the engineering part of the project. So all the materials coming from the Expo in Milan were packed into 2 containers, and they were shipped to Lebanon. And as soon as they arrived on site, the site was located inside a tented settlement. So it was really in close proximity where people live. And as soon as the containers arrived, everybody was really excited, children, and also parents and adults. They were really excited to see what was going on, and as soon as they knew that they were able to participate in the construction, they were even more excited. And so we started this construction process with the community, and we were unpacking everything, assessing the materials that we received from Italy, and starting this repurposing process of making this structure become a school, basically. So in Italy, obviously, the structure was a pavilion, so it was an exhibition space. It was open, it had no walls, so obviously it wasn't ready to just be rebuilt as such and be a school. So there was a lot of work that we had to do in designing the structure with Arup, as I said before, to make it safe for the new use, and also a lot of design choices we had to make for the materials that were going to form the walls of the school, and also we had to create a new spatial configuration. So we had to rearrange these units that you see in this image to create a space that was adequate for the school and for the specific needs that teachers and children identified during the participatory assessment phase. So the construction took few months, and as I said, the local community was really involved in the process, and they were really happy to work on it, even sometimes working very late at night and also sharing moments with us, even beyond the work. And for example, this is a picture from a wedding that took place in the settlement while we were constructing the school, and we were invited to attend, of course, and also we had to help a little bit to build like a stage for the ceremony. So that's also a bit part of the work that we do. And it was really fascinating to see how children were perceiving the work that we were doing. So this is a drawing from a young girl who was living right next to the site in a tent that was just on the edge of the construction site. And she was drawing every day what was going on in the site, and it's really fascinating to see how she's picturing the construction. But what's really important also to see in this drawing is that she would really appreciate every single person that was building the school, whether they were people she knew from the community or volunteers that were coming, or us from the organization. And as I said, all the people who built it were hired from the local community, from the settlement. And we did this also through a sort of training program that we wanted to do. So we hired skilled labor, so people who already knew how to build, as well as youth who maybe didn't have a lot of experience in construction, but they wanted to learn. And so by pairing up basically skilled and unskilled, we also created this sort of training program that at the end of the project basically represents a livelihood for the youth who participated in the construction. And so after 4 months, we finally completed the building, and as soon as we opened, the school was already running at full capacity, providing education and safe learning spaces for around 350 children.
So we always follow up on the school, and we keep improving, adding and changing as the needs change of the school, of the students, of the teachers. We have a sort of family in the settlement because of the time we spend there, about the relationships we created, and we always visit and hear from them. And what's really nice about this project is that for most of the people who helped build it, it became a source of pride. It became their school. They really protected. And here, Yusuf, who is a father from the Jarrahiyeh settlement, he's originally from Homs in Syria. He said that the school gave them hope for a better future for their children because it was built by the community, and it created a good learning environment for them. What is also very interesting about this project is the choice of materials that we had to use to build the school. The school is located in the Bekaa Valley, which is main agricultural land in Lebanon. And in the winter, it's extremely cold and harsh with snows. And in the summer, it's very hot and dry. So a very important design feature was insulation, and what kind of insulation did we want to use? So we decided to use a sheep wool as insulation material. The reason we chose that is because farms are mainly located in this area, sheep farms. It is locally available. It has great insulation properties, and it is known as a traditional material. Women already knew how to clean the wool, but they used to use it to fill mattresses or pillows. So the process of creating sheep wool as insulation included another step, which is the innovation that we brought to this material, which is how to treat it in order to become protected from insects. So really the last part. And with this, we were able to hire women who in this context usually are not engaging in any construction site. So in this project, in most of our projects, we always try to engage women who also join us on construction sites. Also view the limited budget of the project, we were using a lot of materials that were in the pavilion for decorative purposes. We used them in the school for really important and vital uses, such as the corrugated iron sheet that became a rain screen that's really important for the protection of the OSB and the insulation. And we also used locally sourced materials, but we used them in a different use from the original function, such as the grain bags fabric that's usually used to pack wheat grains, but we used it in this case to pack the sheep wool in the roof of the school. So as a result, we have a very well insulated classroom that's naturally lit, naturally ventilated, allowing a good learning environment, and it is the only safe space of its kind in the settlement, which allowed other NGOs that want to work in these informal settlements to use it for other activities, such as distribution of aid, doing yoga classes with the children, teaching English for young kids. Yeah.
Okay, so what did we learn from this project? Especially if we look at it from the whole process that led to the implementation of the school. What we learned is that, I mean, a very important lesson is that it's possible to reuse temporary structures for like new purposes, whether this is a humanitarian purpose because an actor like Save the Children wanted to do that, or you can use it locally for cultural facilities, whatever, but it's possible to reuse it, and it's economically feasible also to do that. And with this project, we also, when we looked back at it, we also realized that we were addressing a lot of the sustainable development goals, which is obviously something that we look at because we're a charity, a non-for-profit, so we look at these things, but also I think architecture in general should look at these goals. And in 2017, this project was awarded the Lafarge-Holcim Award, like it won the award because it was clearly addressing all the target issues that the award looks at, which are progress, people, planet, prosperity, and place. And so when we talk about sustainable construction and sustainability, we're talking not just about the building itself, but we're talking about also all the aspects that we mentioned. So the people, the program, as well as the design and the choices that you make in the design process. So like Joana explained really well, when you choose insulation, how do you choose it? There are so many aspects that you can touch by choosing just one single material. So really sustainability goes beyond the architect's presence. So like what's happening to the building after and what did you generate with that building?
Okay, I'd like to conclude with our recently completed project that's implemented in Bereliez. It's called the Participatory Spatial Intervention, and Bereliez is a town also in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, but that hosts a very high number of displaced communities, Palestinian and recently Syrians. What is unique about this project is that we were able to engage with the local community through a very thorough and long process of participation to develop the design brief that they were able to develop it themselves and to participate in the shaping of their built environment. We recruited and trained, together with the University College London, a group of 7 local researchers that are from the different communities living in the town, that are Palestinian, Syrian, and Lebanese. We trained them on how to do research. We trained them how to research the infrastructure needs and problems, as well as the vulnerabilities of the different communities living in the town. And together with their own communities, they developed a design brief that would address their needs and their aspirations. The site of intervention was chosen as a public social infrastructure. It was the entrance road to the town. It was the only place where all communities use it. And the design was a series of small interventions that stretched from the beginning of the road till the end in order to make it more accessible, more child-friendly, and safe. For example, this is one key location that the locals found important to intervene. As you see, the sidewalk is covered by cars, and here you have a very busy health center, polyclinic. So it was very unsafe for people to access the polyclinic. We transformed it into a pedestrian-only space with a main shading area and a seating area. We included playful features, as you see in the bench, as well as floor games for kids to engage with. We also worked on the accessibility of the sidewalks, which in some locations were as high as 60 centimeters. So by adding access ramp alone on all of the sidewalks, we were able to make the whole road more inclusive, allowing persons who use a wheelchair, as well as mothers with strollers and elderly, to use the sidewalk in a more safe way. Also, the locals found really important to add signage in order to highlight very important areas for them in the town. We collaborated with two young local artists, young women, who added mosaics on top of all of the seatings that were in the town, and we used discarded ceramic tiles in order to do that. We also partnered with cycling activists to create a mural that all the community participated in painting, but also encouraging people to use more bicycles. And with the municipality, as you see in the other picture, we managed to highlight a very key location to add speed bumps in order to reduce the speed on the road. In this example, we wanted to tackle the issue of pollution and waste, and it is a very big issue in the town, and obviously with the small interventions, we weren't able to tackle it fully, but we were at least able to raise awareness on the importance of recycling. As you see in this shade is made of plastics that were of shampoo bottles or any other containers that the people themselves collected, and they cut, and then they installed in order to make the shade. We have other shades using different other recycled materials. And to conclude with, we really learned that architecture is not just simply about building, but it's also about process and community empowerment. And as it is provocatively stated by Giancarlo De Carlo, architecture has become too important to be left for architects. And I'd like to close by saying that there's a Lafarge Holcim Awards entries are open, and we do encourage all of you young architects that are listening to us today to really apply, because it really meant a lot for us as a small and young practice to get their really prestigious acknowledgement. And yes, thank you so much for listening.
David?
David, please welcome on stage.
Thank you, Sonia. I am very happy to be here
Я
to
искренне
present the inaugural our daily Strelka Award. Especially as this is not working. Especially as Strelka turns 10 years, our daily turns 11 years, and we're two institutions that were born almost at the same time, but we share a common vision, a common mission on the importance of cities, the importance of development. Strelka does it from education, projects for the city, and our daily does it from the knowledge, from the inspiration and tools to help architects from all over the world to develop better architecture and therefore better cities. But our daily didn't start from the usual centers. Our daily doesn't come from Western Europe or from the US. Our daily comes from Chile, a place that is very far away outside of the traditional networks, but also a place that gives us a good perspective of the world. Being in our corner, or rather on the top, we're able to have a very good perspective from our corner of what is happening all over the world. We know that innovation now in architecture, it is happening in very different contexts. Contexts where there are scarcity or where there is market pressures that force architects to innovate. So that has taken us to go outside to the world and to make these connections in a model that is bidirectional, unlike magazines that were produced in centers between a small group of people and then sent to the other side of the world to say, hey, this is what's relevant. This is a bidirectional platform that 7 years ago took us here to Strelka because we knew that something was happening or will happen with the future of Moscow, with the future of Russia, and that Strelka was going to be an important player. And since then, we have forged a bridge from Russia to the world. But also has been to detect this architecture, this innovation coming from Indonesia, coming from Vietnam, coming from Iran, Paraguay, or Chile. And at the end, what we have created is to empower architects because they contribute with their knowledge in this platform, but also generates opportunities, generate connections. It's not something static. But also this empowerment has come from the recognition, because there are projects that are better than others and that have a deep impact, such as the projects that we have been seeing today. And that has led us to establish what we call the Building of the Year Award that has been running for many years, recognizing, for sure, renowned architects, but also, thanks to its distributed dynamic, the work of upcoming architects. And this is an award that has been voted by our users, where tens of thousands of people filter to the hundreds and thousands of projects every year to recognize the best. Sometimes with this internet, with the screen, you don't know what is happening, but at the end it's architects applying their intelligence. And it's a community that sometimes is anonymous, but trust me, it is composed by some of the world's most relevant architects, and even all of you. So that is why, with our constant conversations with Strelka, we decided to put focus and to create an award to recognize what is happening in the region. We invite architects from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. But we wanted to put emphasis in this young generation, architects whose practices are less than 10 years old, with the recent production, projects from the past 5 years. And the call was successful. We received more than 100 submissions, from which our group of curators, together with Strelka, we filtered it down to 50 relevant projects that were put for public voting, from where we had 15 finalists. And after that, we had the 3 winners, and today we will announce the grand winner. These finalist projects show the different stages of development and of important questions and challenges across the region. Education, public projects, public spaces, master planning, and even small projects that will also have impact on the public realm. And we're very happy to see that also it's not just advancing through architecture, but it's also recognizing what exists to put it in value, as we saw in some of the presentations today. So this picture is not just about the winners, but about everybody who participates in this process that we expect to reproduce in the near future. And the winning projects come from different countries. We had the Art Court Creative Center in Chisinau, Moldova, by Maxim Kalujak. The Garage Screen Cinema here in Moscow in Gorky Park by Syndicate Architects. And the coffee production plant in Tbilisi, Georgia by Kamalasade Architects. And I ask you for an applause to these 3 firms that were the winners of the first Strelka Ardeli Award. Before unveiling the grand winner, we're going to invite the architects to do presentations about their projects. And we're going to start with the coffee production plant in Tbilisi by Kamalasat architects, who sadly could not come here, and as they are in China, couldn't also connect to do like a broadcast. So I will take their place to explain you about this particular project in Tbilisi. So this coffee plant exists in a plot between the airport and the city, where the landscape, the geography of Tbilisi is very strong. You will see the mountains. So the architects tried to make the project, what could be in a very monolithic box, part of this landscape. They decided to arrange all the parts of the core of the production facilities around the plot, and open it to the back, to this small forest that you see. And in between, they will have to mix different types of programs for public events, coffee tasting. But the most important is how they treat this concrete facade, mixing elements in a double curvature, because of the presence that this will have between the airport and the city. So this monolithic facade will change during day and night, but also throughout the day with the different shadows and reflections. So it's a very interesting work that they will do in this facade that at first looks like this rock, part of the Georgian landscape with this strong dynamism, but then it falls to reveal its opening, and inside it is a very rich program. As you can see, different facilities, public and private, or for more private work, are arranged in very different levels. So even inside the project, you have the presence of this changing geography, where heights define different spaces that can be used for the workers and for public coffee tasting. And in between, these atriums bring inside the nature that that also bring this light, generating very high quality interior spaces. I hope that I explained it as good as the team from Kamalasade would have done it. Now, I want to invite to the stage Maxim Kaluhak from Moldova to present the Artcore Creative Center.
Hello everyone, my name is Maxim Kaluzhak, I'm from Moldavia and I'm an architect. I wanted to, before I present the project, I wanted to say a couple of words about myself, about how I managed to approach this project. 11 years ago, I graduated from the Polytechnical University of Moldavia. Since then, I started to work independently on my projects, and right now, I have a small studio, 3 people only. Of course, I would love to start with the first project, which was really important for me. I used it as a kind of a training platform to sort out my principles that I've been using for 10 years in my work. This is one of the first projects in Chisinau. In 2013, it was awarded with an international prize, and for me it meant that my principles were true and right, and I had to go on in the same direction. What am I trying to say? I think that architects have to leverage individual approach to architecture. They have to include their personal sensations and feelings into the space. They have to highlight design details and architectural details. I think they could also introduce their own art objects. For example, here I did both paintings, object design, and so on and so forth. Further on, all the private projects that I had to go down into details, and I had to rethink them, with this goal, I form my own position. There are no standards. I think standards are a thing of the past. We need to form our work on a totally different basis. This is a kindergarten in Chisinau, children's space. I decided to use a totally different structure, not to use this colorful design. It's my personal position that bringing children up is a big part of forming human beings of the future. We used only natural materials here, used natural light and different tricks and features of intimacy and trust. I thought that these components are enough to build your project as an emotional impact, I would say so. I don't think that we should limit ourselves only to the functionality or the aesthetics of the space. It should be about the impact we have on our commissioners or on the community that's going to use our design. I will show you just a number of my completed projects. I think they will illustrate really well my approach to architecture. I will repeat myself lots of these elements where I did personally myself, and I still work very active in this direction, though it's not that relevant now, I would say. Now time matters, time is money, and as for individual approach, it seems to be too complicated for many projects, unfortunately. All the projects that I'm showing you now were completed in Chisinau, in Moldova. Again, these are different uses of lighting, decorative elements, painting even. So I immersed myself as the author into this architecture. And I wanted now to introduce my main project to you. I had the chance to, I won a competition 2 years ago, and I almost lived here for 2 years. I wanted to put into flash my principles that I formed around 10 years ago. So I think that the architect's personal participation should not only be on the level of design or on the design of all the computing, the software, and so on and so forth. No, I think architects have to be engaged in everything. It's like sculpture making, really. The main sense, the main purpose of this platform, it will be a creative center commissioned by the Association of Creative Industries, and our partners here were the Swedish Embassy and the British Embassy. Maybe that was why my concept was actually accepted and implemented later on. The main idea was to build a pavilion in the courtyard of the Art Academy for different events. Of course, I ignored the brief, because I think that the right architects, the great architects, have to form the brief, have to be on par with commissioners. So I think we can change the brief if we think it's not rightly formed. So I transformed the brief, and my main goal here was to create a hub for social activity, a kind of a public space that is absent in Chisinau. Unfortunately, in the perspective of contemporary architecture, Chisinau, well, I don't want to be insulting here, but it's a bit provincial, really. I would say that this is actually the first sample of contemporary architecture in Chisinau, and I'm really proud of it because I'm the author of it. The main concept was designed around the local context, because there are a few buildings here that date back to different eras. One of them was from the Tsarist Empire, the other comes from the Soviet Union, the 50s, the 70s.
первых же концептуальных разработках создание современного объекта с
And I wanted to create a contemporary kind of space. I didn't want to anyhow
четким определением, что есть
denying the local historical context, but I wanted to rethink what is contemporaneity for this space, and I wanted it to be a venue for the contemporary architecture of the 21st century, as I see it.
Позволило сформировать некое пространство, где я использовал открытый бетон, колерованный бетон.
I used here open concrete. That was the first time I used it as material. As you can see, it had multifunctional areas in it. I had an atrium for the exhibitions. The atrium actually connected all the spaces inside of the venue.
Он как бы разрезается в скорлупе.
I would say, and it's also cut with a kind of a shell made out of steel. It was a very important project for me, and I think it was an important project for the city. Actually, this venue became really popular. It became an attraction point for the local community. All sorts of people come here. I think we completed the project successfully, and I'm really grateful to all our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maxim, and congratulations. Please stand here. Now I want to invite Victor from Syndicate Architects to present us the garage screen cinema here in Gorky Park.
Раз, два, три. О, она работает.
Hello everyone, my name is Viktor Slobov. I am one of the founders of Syndicate Office. And before I start my presentation, I wanted to say thank you first of all to Art Daily and to Strelka for such opportunities for young architects. I will tell you a couple of words about my team, and I will present our project that actually was in the finals of the Strelka competition. There are 8 people on our team. We all come from different backgrounds. We have different areas of expertise, and we love working with each other. We don't have a physical office. We work from different cities and towns, and even from different countries. As for our team, it's 2 years old, and over this time we worked on different interesting projects. In some of the competitions we almost won, and we won only one of them. We chose competitions so that they would have a really clear brief and a potential for practical implementation. As you can see, we worked with small architectural forms, public institutions, a school, cultural center, and I will tell you about our final project that was in the finals of the competition. This is the Garage Screen Cinema Hall on the Square of Arts in the Gorky Park. This is one of the main squares of the Gorky Park and maybe even of Moscow. Many of you have already been there and have seen this project. Some of you even have watched a movie in there, and I will tell you about not about the technical side of the project, but about the conceptual side of it. So how did this work start? We didn't want to work with diagrams or planes. We started with the images and we looked for them in the most popular films, and we literally translated it into architecture. For example, the running line from the Star Wars turned into the form of our cinema, and we used references to Blade Runner 2 in the color scheme. We wanted to rethink the square that the garage screen is on, and we created this kind of iconic symbol of the program, this neon site garage screen. First of all, it works as a lighting spot. It lit the square the whole summer, and also attracted the attention of the passers-by. This is how we interacted with the visitors of the square, with the local context, and as you can see, people loved it. What is special about this summer's cinema, and what is the difference between this one and a winter cinema? First of all, it's an open-air site. We don't have any rooftop, and you can see the stars from the cinema house. Unfortunately, this summer it rained a lot, so we have this kind of light cover which can protect you from bad weather. The cinema is open. It means that it don't have any clear boundary as such. The interior is intrinsically connected with the exterior. Everybody on the square turns into the viewer, the film audience. Some people just stay in the square and some watch the screen inside. So it works as a performance both ways. Films are different. Some of them requires more concentration, so you can descend the drapery to make it more chamber-like, and we used velvet here. It works as an acoustic shell by blocking the external sounds. There are a lot of scenarios of using it. It depends on the weather and the film screened. It's temporary. It was there on the square the whole summer. Soon it will be dismantled. And we wanted at the end for it not to turn into a rubbish pile. So we decided to turn this structure into merchandise. And Garage has already presented a line of its merchandise made from the former shell of the Garage Screen Cinema. Actually, we have two narratives in our project. The external and the internal. Internal, the red velvet, creates some mysterious or mysterious atmosphere, the atmosphere of celebration. On the outside, sorry, the video doesn't work. That's a pity. So, well, I will show you the previous slide anyway. You could see it there too. So we wanted the image to be dynamic from the outside. We wanted the cinema to look differently at different times of the day. So we used this special kind of shell, this plastic that changes its color depending on the sun rays and the angle. We are really grateful for the support to the Garage Museum, the Strelka team, and Art Daily. Thank you very much.
Well, these three projects represent not only the excellence in design of young architects, but also what they are thinking, their approaches, how they research to create these great architectural pieces. And now, to announce the winner, the grand winner of the Art Daily Strelka Award, I want to invite Barbara Melnikova, CEO of Strelka, and Denis Leontiev from Strelka KB.
Well, first of all, I wanted to express my gratitude to all the participants. Thank you very much for taking part in this competition. Thank you very much for your input, for your applications. And I would really want architects to work with no boundaries, and I wish you had as many opportunities as you want to for your projects. Now let me find out who the winner is. Georgia. Dear Georgi, unfortunately you are not present here, but as Sonia told me, you are watching now us online. So on behalf of Strelka Art Daily and everyone who's here and everyone who's online, to congratulate you once again, Khmeladze Architects. Congratulations.
We will make sure that they receive their physical award in the Tbilisi, but also now I want to ask you, Barbara and Denis, to give the diploma to Maxim and Victor.
Guys, please, come to the stage. Denis.
More applause, please. These guys are chosen from 100 applications from all around the world. Can you imagine that? And I want to remind you, actually, that the award means that the winner will, the award will be a film which will be produced by the end of the year about the winner and their construction bureau. Thank you very much.
Good evening, dear guests and participants of the Future Architect Conference. So we're opening our evening session, and please welcome tonight's headliner, Kulapat Yantrasast, born in Thailand, but his bureau is based in the USA. He's going to be talking about how he founded his bureau titled Why, and he's going to be talking about the principle of his work. And he'll be talking about how it turns out that they have designed 50 galleries all around the world. So Kulapat, please welcome.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for staying this late. I know this is a pre-dinner show, so thank you for that. But first thing, I really want to express my gratitude and really impression on Strelka, which I think it's so fabulous. You know, I heard about it before. This is my first time. And the energy and the nimbleness of this place is inspirational. And I keep thinking about what other places around the world that I have seen that have this level of energy and savviness. And I think this is quite unique. So I'm very, very impressed and congratulate for such a wonderful summer also. So that's, get out of the way. Thank you. So today, I talk a little bit about our work at Y. I think we have a very small office. We have around 40, which make it even smaller because we have 2 locations. One, we start in LA, and then we open in New York around a few years after, so to function around that. We work a variety of things, mostly cultural and social projects. That's what we do. This is our office in LA, which is we stay in the same place when we started. And so that's where we are, and we have projects, you know, we actually have one project in Russia now, which is really nice. We have projects in Europe, Asia, a lot in Americas, and all of that. Well, before that, I want to start with giving you a little bit about who I am, you know, as that. So this is the map. So I was born and grew up in Thailand, which is the country in the middle, you know, over there. And then I also went to school and lived in Japan for about 15 years. I have a PhD in architecture, and then worked with my mentor, Tadao Ando, for 8 years. And so my life is really kind of in between these 2 places, which is kind of interesting. Because Thailand as a country, as a culture, is like a little guy in the middle of coach with 2 big giants on both sides. One is China and one is India. You know, it's called Indochine. And so when you're a small person between 2 big countries, you learn to behave. You learn to adjust between China and India. And Thai culture really reflected that, especially in the food. Japan is the opposite. Japan is, you know, somewhat small country at the very end of Asia as an island. Just like this guy, he's in the back row by himself. No one bothers him. He's quite isolated. And Japanese culture, in a way, also reflect that in a sense that it's very refined, it's abstraction, and it's really taking a lot of influence also from China and India. But it has time and distance to really refine, absorb, and make into its own. And how do we know that? We can see a lot from food, actually. You know, I'm just going to bore with that. Japanese food, you know, when you think about it, a lot of that actually comes from China and other places. But it's really about refinement. It's about abstraction, the order, the clarity of thought, the strength of unity. You know, in a way, that's what, you know, we all know as Japanese food. Thai food, the opposite, is all about mixing diverse, all kind of things together, many flavors at the same time, salty, sweet, spicy. It's all about maximization of taste, whereas the Japanese is about the clarity of thought and ideas. And I think it's very important to think, because I think food is one aspect of culture which is really close to us. I think architecture at one point was close to people too, but I think we lost touch with it. Architecture has gone into its own little isolated think tank. And so I wish that we have good relationship with people as much as food. But what I'm thinking about here, and since because I live between Thailand and Japan, what I'm seeing is that I think culture in general is moving from Japanese sushi into pad Thai. And what do I mean by that is that culture used to be very severe and strong. One singular person, one patron, one leader, pick one architect and say, hey, you designed the whole city. No one else doesn't have to say anything. It's a very clear order of sense. But as we all know, the world now is becoming diverse and complex by its nature. And so we need not only just one ingredient like sushi, that you only have a piece of fish, and the operation is how to cut it. But culture is now becoming mixed, because there's no one culture, it's everything. Culture in the 21st century is all about mixing diversities and others, which we all know about that. I'm pretty sure it's the same in Russia as the rest of the world. I think the designers and the people who hold the key to how you can make unity out of diversity will win in the end, because it's about getting every one of us to agree on one ingredient, on one dish. And how do we design? If design is like that, how can you be someone that allows everyone to be part of that? I think for that reason, I see that architecture is moving from something very abstract and minimal, which is like a Japanese sushi, into something very mixed and messy, and also very nifty, just like Thai food. So that's kind of one thing that I want to talk about, how we move along. So with that notion, I started to, in a way, position my office in a way. We started in 2004, and one day I realized that when I was in the office, like everyone was trying to solve every problem with architecture, because that's what we have. Architecture is like this little hammer that we have, and everything looked like a nail to you. All my staff was trying to like architecturization, everything. And I feel like there's something wrong with that. How can we really be a full toolbox? So around 2009, I think, we diversified, around the time we opened the office in New York, we diversified from architecture. We have landscape, we have object design, we have art, and not only just the people we hire, we start to really engage people in general, curators, designers, artists, ecologists, anthropologists, to work with us on project. We invited them not only as advisor, but we also kind of invite them to design with us. And that process has been something that I'm very kind of proud of, because it really led up to something quite interesting. And for me, it felt that architects, instead of sitting there and designing a building per program, per brief, we should be engaged on a high level and really engage with vision and program, allow us to have more inputs into not just forms and spaces, but also visions and long-term social changes. So that's something that I'm very interested in. And now our office, both between New York and LA, we have 5 workshops. We have buildings, which is architecture, ground, which is landscape. We have objects, we make artwork, installation. We have ideas, which is kind of research and create outreach and things like that. And we just start our museums workshop just a month ago, because we have someone who I really respect, that I worked with before as a client. So we have formed this museums workshop to work with museums, not only just to design, but talk about operations and visions and other things. So this is kind of where we're coming from. So I'm all about seeing design as an ecology, as how everything connects to one another. I felt that the age of design in a vacuum is done. the damage is already done. So how do we get out from our ivory tower of profession and really collaborate and listen and do something that no one else has done before? I think that's the keyword to the future of the profession. And since there's a lot of young people today, I want you to think like that. I hope you can see the point that we can only be relevant if we really involve in a larger vision of the society. And I think that's what I hope to do. Anyway, so what I'm talking to today, I might show just a few projects. You know, our office is called Why, and I always think that architecture, actually great solutions, really exist between why and why not. You know, we were told in school that why represent rationale, thinking, the reason something exists, why would you do this and that. So it in a way represents knowledge and all of the rational, thinkable process architecture is built. Why not, in a way, represent imagination, you know, flimsy, crazy ideas and all of that. And I think, you know, when you think about it, everything that you see in life, you know, you base is on the rules of the game and the rationale why things exist. But if that's alone, it's not unique, and especially in this day and age, the computer can actually do it. So if you only think what is thinkable, everyone will think so, including the computer. In order to be unique, you need to have your own why not, which is the ingredients, the secret sauce, shall we say, that make your food different than other people. But at the same time, if you don't know how to cook, then the why not sauce will just not stick into anything. So the balance of the two, I think, is very important to think. And that's make each of us have our own solutions of what we want to cook and why it's unique from others. So that's kind of what I think. And maybe it starts because, you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about Thailand and Japan. Japan, of course, is about reasons and rationale. Thai is about, you know, exuberance and, you know, emotions and impressions. And because of that, to see all these differences allow me to think, what's the right solution? I'm sure we all have similar contrasts or diverse things in life that we're trying to resource. And I think that's where unique things lie when you're trying to make contradictions come together in your own mind. Anyway, so I really kind of like and excited about this idea of having both, you know, imagination and knowledge and how the two of them work together to make the work. So the first project, which talk a little about, so this is mushroom, if you don't know what it is, and this is sunflower. So this is the beginning or how we think about this project. So we have a house that, in a way, have to be built on the ground, but cantilever out from the ground because it's on a cliff. So this cantilevering reminds me of this mushroom that stick on the trees, so sticking out. At the same time, the house is facing not the view, but the other neighbors. So the best way to do this is to really rotate the house towards the sun, like a sunflower. So this is what, let me see whether this is the house. So it sits, you can see that it's kind of almost like a cantilever from a cliff. At the same time, you see that the house rotates itself towards the view and the sun. So I felt that, you know, in my process of designing, I was trying to see something that doesn't look too boxy and really create that. And I learned that from looking at, in this case, the code regulations as well as the need for view. It kind of create this kind of combination of that. So the house is now under construction after years of permit. The other, just kind of to give this idea, it's about a building and for Mont Blanc that we competed for, but we didn't win. It was for their museum, kind of a center. So the thought was that what's great about a pen? A pen is a pen is a pen, but what the pen could do. So I was thinking about the building as calligraphy, because calligraphy is the most wonderful dance of ink. And so how can we create the interior experience, you know, move around the building as if you have this most beautiful calligraphy. And so when you're inside the building, you have this moving around from one to the other. You arrive on the outside, the garden, so the choreograph, the dance of experience go through is part of that. So that's kind of our concept. We did not win this competition. I think that an architect from Spain won that one. The other, now this time we actually win. Good. This is a project in Scotland. It is a park. Let me show you what the project looked like. So this is, it's called the Ross Pavilion and the Westminster Street Gardens. It's right under the castle in Edinburgh. And so it was a big competition. We won this over a variety of very well-known architects. And to be honest, the reason why we won, in my opinion, is because we may be one of the few architects that actually use landscape as a concept. Everyone was trying to make a beautiful box as an object pavilion. Our solution was, we felt, and this goes back to the concept, is that in terms of the acupuncture architecture notion, how can we use a building not only to be a beautiful object, but how can it solve a problem? And the problem in this case is that Edinburgh is divided into old and new city. And because of that, you know, there's a very chasm that's made by the train. So our project, in addition to being a pavilion, we try to connect the city back together. You can see from this diagram, which I'll not bore you about, but a variety of things. So we're using architectural ambition to solve an urban project by landscape design. So I felt that was important to think about because, you know, I mean, not that they are not great architects, but because it was a blind competition. So at the last round, there were 7 architects, and we show up for the interview. And I was actually surprised that our project looked different because everyone was really making beautiful, beautiful pavilion. And ours is basically like a pavilion that's almost invisible, kind of interlaid into the landscape itself. Anyway, so it was a process also that not only that is landscape oriented, it also involved, even during the competition, that we engaged the local citizens of Edinburgh. We set up workshops and we talked to them about what they want to do, you know, what can this project help them, not only for music and performances, but urban renovations and others. So we actually got a lot of ideas and a lot of strategies by hearing and listening to people as we're doing the competition. So that's part of that. So this is now in design development, about to go into construction. This is a small house that we did in Venice, California, which is close to where I live, but it's not my house. But the idea is the client wants the biggest house, but also the biggest garden. And so, which is, you know, kind of seemed to be a conflicting interest. But we felt like, well, and in Venice, you know, houses are charming because there's like small traditional bungalows. So how can we do that? So we have the idea, why don't we just lift the house up and just let the garden go through, so therefore you can have the house and you can have the garden. So that's kind of what we were trying to do in this diagram that you see. So this is what the house looked like. So the house basically, you know, the bedrooms and the rooms is lifting up from the ground, and the ground just becomes this glass box that you live in, you know, living, kitchen, dining, connecting to the pool and the garden, and all the bedrooms and the living room, I mean the family rooms on the second floor, and each of the rooms of the bedrooms are designed like a little bungalow, so it has a scale that related to the bungalows of Venice, which is everyone was, you know, just the interior of the house, which is have a lot of concrete and wood. This is again the look of it. Another project, which is our museum. We do quite a few museums. Right now we have maybe around 10 or 15 museums in the office. This is a renovation project, but I want to talk about, because it is a well-known museum. This is the Metropolitan Museum in New York. We're doing the big renovation of what is called the Rockefeller Wing, which is around 50,000 square feet. The part that's important to me, even though it's a renovation project, is that it is a renovation of Kevin Roche, who's an architect that I truly respect, who did a lot of expansion at the Met itself. And it's also important because for me, as someone who goes a lot to museums, I see museums as a building type that can solve world problems. Because museums, maybe restaurants also, is a place that allow people to like one another. You know, I think you might not like the other person, but you eat his food or her, you know, art and all of these. So culture has a way of creating empathy. And I think it's important is in this time when people seem to see more difference, and hate more than empathy and understanding. So I think museums is important in that sense that it is a site for creative encounters and empathy. And so all the museums we do, we try to make sure that when people see the art, they like the art and they also like one another. So that's kind of part of my matchmaker job as a designer. So in this case, we represent, in this particular wing, it represented art from America, Africa, and Oceania, which is 75% of the population of the world, and how these non-Western objects sit in a rather Western museum is important. How can we create a sense of equal and a sense of synergy between that? So that's what we did. So we reinstall every object, we renovate all of that, and create an uplifting and really kind of focusing on the objects and the masterpiece, and allow them to really relate to the Greek and Romans and modern and contemporary and Western artwork around it. This is another project that it's a private museum that we're doing in the Philippines. It's a Kunsthalle, so it doesn't have a collection, just similar to the garage in that sense. This one sits right on the river in Manila, and it's around 80,000 square feet or 8,000 square meters. So the idea that how can you create something that's really tropical, but also function as an urban hub. So that's what we do. You can see the site. It sits on around 3 acres of land right on the river. So the idea was, to create this sense of arbor as if you're sitting under the palm tree. So this is what we designed. You can see that. I also like the building to be porous so that you can go through. It's kind of its own architectural promenade. So you can go into the galleries, you can go into others. Manila doesn't have too many contemporary art museums. So this one has to be not only for art, but design and fashion and cars and all those things. So it has to be rather flexible. And also there's a big component of nature. This is part of the design. This is the underside of, again, the whole metaphor was as if you walk into a palm trees, and all of the design relate to that aspect of the project. This is another project in Chicago. This one has to do with history. So it started here. This is in 1896. I'm sorry, in this one it's 1893, which is the Chicago Exposition. It's one of the biggest expositions in America. This is when a lot of things happen. And it happened, and it was planned by Daniel Burnham, who's a master architect in Chicago, together with Olmsted, who's also another master landscape architect in America at that time. That was maybe the peak of the beginning of modern architecture in America. So what we did is after the expo, the park exists. And so we did the master plan for this park over here called Jackson Parks, which is an Olmsted design. Right now, we started this project before, but now the Obama President Library is moving over here. So now it's become a very heated location. It's right on the lake, but before that, no one was paying attention, but now everyone just wanted to do something. So that's part of that. So what we did is that we create a pavilion, if I can see, in the middle where it's a parking lot right now, and Olmsted designed a music court which never been used because it was too low. So we upgrade that and create a music court around it. The building looked like a bird because at the time, in the expo, Japan sent a pavilion to be built on the park, which is based after a Japanese traditional building based after a phoenix, because phoenix is believed to be the renewal, the energies, and all of that. And so that building, which was built in 1893, survived. It's the only building is allowed in the park on a wooded island, and also the only building that's left after the expo until it was burnt down in the Second World War when the Japanese and American relationship was not good. And so we built this as a second Phoenix Pavilion, but this time for culture and for local communities. It's places from like daycare, museums, and also it functioned as a stage for the music court. And this is a cafe looking at the lake and the museum itself. And part of the first phase of the project is we invited Yoko Ono, who's a Japanese-American artist, to work with us to create this sculpture over here called Sky Landing, because Yoko thinks that, and this is at exactly where the pavilion used to be, because of her being someone that lived between Japan and America, we felt that she can reflect on this aspect of relationship of cultures between America and Japan. And of course, she talked a lot about peace and how that evolves. So that's our first phase of the project. The second phase will be this pavilion that will hopefully be constructed soon. This is actually my own house, which I think you guys should come to visit, my new friends. First, another thing is I'm very glad that I made new friends at this symposium, so I'm glad that continue to do that. So I don't know why I'm showing this, but anyway, it's a happy house. I love living there. And nice, you can see the pool, you can see the house. It has a little bit of a Thai house quality to it. The last project is the project that we started, which finally just about to start construction, which is a bridge crossing a river. But what we did is that it started 2005, and when I went to see the site, I was very angry that because there's supposed to be a pedestrian bridge crossing the Ala River. It's only around 120 feet long, but the river was full of trash and dead animals and everything. So I felt very angry about that. So to the point I felt like I need to make the bridge out of the trash, so people understood how they treat the river. And so that's how I started, by using concrete as an aggregate and really incorporate the trash from the river onto the bridge and really started to think about. And as we think about that, we started to kind of roll this in a way that, for example, this wall is almost like a stratum into the earth. So when you dig it, you can see layers of trash, from your grandparents' age to your parents' generation to your generation. And so it's a kind of a moment that things that never go away. It's always with you, and you have to deal with that. And so when I did this, I didn't realize that it would be, kind of received well by the city, because they saw that because most of the bridge don't look like this, and they have concerns about safety because of the walls and things, but they love the idea that they can use the bridge to teach kids about trash and all of that. So this is the mock-up we did. Again, this is the conclusion slide. Thank you for staying. Again, I hope that there's one thing that you can leave with today, is that even though for a small office like ours, I felt that our contribution to the profession could be the viewpoint we take, learn from all cultures and be able to contribute some ideas towards something in the future. So thank you.
We have a Q&A session now. We're going to switch to it. Please raise your hand. We will bring you the mic. Okay, here is the first question. Hello, thank you very much for the talk. You have cool and really diverse projects, thank you. I wanted to ask you about the following. Do you have any principles or approaches to design, to planning, which you observe all the time, or is it different with every project? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I don't think I do, and to be honest, because I work with Taekwondo for 8 years, and when there's a very strong, recognizable language, and I felt, I went there and I contributed that language because I was very involved in the process. But after that, I felt, there must be something outside of this. So I want to kind of start with nothing. I felt that, if I have skills in terms of design and things, I would like to come to me. I'm not only using concrete or using geometry. I'm using nature, I'm using wood, I'm using steel, depending. But if there's any guiding philosophy or thinking, I think it might be the sense that I really like to create a place that people feel happy. You know, I think somehow, you know, it's a cliche to say, but I felt somehow we forgot that our work is a communication. We only produce objects. The other part from the object back to people's life is if the experience. And if the experience doesn't deliver, no matter how beautiful this object is, it doesn't do the job. You know, so I felt that's the case. And I tend to, you know, more and more I tend to want the context of the site to lead me. And more as I get older, I think nature has always been something that I go to for inspirations, and I try to do more and more of that. Yeah.
We had another question here in the audience. Please raise your hand. Here it is. Hello. You have amazing projects, really. They have both a beautiful form and a function to them, and most importantly, they have a message, a meaning. I want to ask you, do you hire or maybe do you take interns, architects from other countries? Is it possible to take an internship with you or to work with you?
Yes. We actually, at this point, out of the 40 we sponsoring 15 green cards. It's ridiculous. And I didn't plan to do it that way, but when we interview people, I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about American designers, but the best people we found are normally foreigners. You know, and I think we work with many schools and cities. We have a few Latvians, because we have a relationship with an organization there, and so every year there's an intern from Latvia, and they're really good. We work with Spain, we work, you know, also American, from the schools there, and me and other people teach at universities, so we sometimes also recruit students. So I think interns are the best thing in things, and for me, even though I have a PhD in architecture, I felt like I learned everything through my mentor. So I believe not in learning things in school, even though I spent a lot of time in school, but really watching and observing someone you respect and learn from that person. Just like, you know, if you want to learn to cook, you cannot learn it in a cooking school. You have to go to a restaurant. You know, I think the same thing that in architecture. Yes, you need to study in school for a little bit, but the best thing is you learn from your job. So I do believe in internship and really bring people in. And yesterday, you know, Winnie Mas talked about how he worked with young people and things like that. I think that's a brave thing to do, and I think that's definitely the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the answer. I also have a question. Your projects cost a lot of money. It's insanely expensive. And here in Russia, we still have the problem of trying to sell our projects. So we always have to explain why it costs so much. And we have to fight for every penny, really. Because the commissioners, they just don't want to pay for the concepts that we suggest. Could you please explain to us why architectural concepts should cost a lot, and how can we convince our commissioners to pay?
I think that's a very good question. And I can tell you honestly that it's not a Russian unique problem. The world has that problem. Yeah. And again, it is a symptom to say that people don't see importance in architecture. You know, I think, so we need to look at it that way, you know, because if you compare to food, again, I'm sorry to go back to food again, people would not put bad ingredients in their body, right? I mean, way back when people would eat anything, but now when you think about in the last 20 years, you have organic, you have, you know, everything's around it. People very care about well-being and health and happiness. I think we need to take that into consideration. And for me, my way of convincing clients to spend money is always to allow them to take a longer look. Because most of the time, people have money. They just don't want to spend. because they feel like, well, if I can get the building for half the price, why not? It looked the same, it doesn't fall apart. So, which is understandable because they didn't go to school in architecture. They couldn't discern, you know, A architecture from C architecture. So you need to, in a way, engage and educate them. So, but I also I always tell my client that when you design a museum, it's not a building, it's a cultural investment, right? When you design a school, it's not a building, it's an educational investment. So you need to be able to tell them how the building can give them the profit, the return. So we have to talk in that social response issue, you know, and I think, to be honest, I felt architects in general are not very good at that because they tend to kind of position themselves as an artist. So therefore, the work should speak for itself. You know, artists should not be talking about why their work have values or have return to people. I think we need to reposition that and talk about why certain things, because it happened in my job every day as well, that I have to defend details, I have to defend materials, I have to defend all of these things. I think, again, education, trust, and investment.
Отличный рецепт, спасибо. У нас есть еще время на пару вопросов.
A great recipe, thank you very much. We have time for 2 more questions. Please raise your hand, we will bring you the mic.
На человека, который, видимо, стесняется поднять руку, я не понимаю, что это за жесты. Вы могли, пожалуйста, встать? Пожалуйста, вас.
Please stand up, because we can't see it.
Sorry.
We can't see you.
What is the one most important thing you learned from your work with Tadao Ando?
Well, I think I learned mostly about how work and life can be the same thing. You know, I think because I work and, you know, live with him very closely, so I see the man and the architect who's different. I see what he talked about and what he did. And I think that was a fundamental lesson for me that, you know, philosophy, you know, it's in America we say walk the walk, right? Walk the talk. And I think he showed that it's doable. Because when you stay, in my case also in universities, the intellectualization of architecture sometimes doesn't help anyone. You know, it's a mind game. And I think he allowed me to think that if you have a philosophy and if you're a good designer, your work needs to carry the philosophy, not your mouth. I think once that happened, you know, I stopped really talking, you know, the work, but I think it's all about that. And I think that was a fundamental awakening for me because even though I like his work from before, you know, I think when I was going to school in Japan, you know, he still was seen as someone who doesn't have a theory. He's like a builder. You know, even though he built beautiful objects, there's no theory. The work is not very easy to analyze. You cannot do a thesis on it because there's no real intellectual kind of parameter that you can use it to judge the work. But when I work with him, when I understand how he worked, when I, you know, I'm trying to put myself into that legacy, that language, I realize that it's just, again, like food. You know, if you have the philosophy, if you have a vision, people should be able to taste it in your food. And if people cannot taste that in your food, it doesn't mean you're not a good cook. You might be a good thinker. And I think that carry with me, that's become something that I measure architecture with also. That everything that you do have to be contained within the work that you produce. So therefore, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Есть еще вопрос? Да, пожалуйста.
One more question, please.
Good evening.
Можно говорить по-русски, вам переведут.
По-русски, хорошо. Мы уже говорили про Tadao Ando.
Sorry, you can switch to the English. I didn't understand that you speak English.
All right.
Sorry.
Можно на любом языке.
So I can ask the question in any language, really.
We mentioned Tadao Ando and the fact that you work together. In his works, he makes brilliant textures, brilliant concrete surfaces. I work at the building just beside. It's a gas tube museum designed by Renzo Piano. And I work as engineer there. We have architectural concretes. Where is the role of the craftsmanship in contemporary architecture? We need to have brilliant masters, people who know how to make these formworks, this brilliant concrete. So there are two questions. What is the role of the craftsmanship today in the contemporary architecture? And the second question, what about secrets in the concrete? Mixtures, how to pour concrete, techniques, and so on. Thank you.
Well, I think you answered your own question. I think craftsmanship is alive, and it's even more needed than before because it's, you know, one of the few human touch left in architecture. You know, I think people are really striving for human quality, right? Because again, I mean, you know, we may not see it, but I feel like, you know, in the next 10 years, a lot of jobs, a lot of life will be replaced by AI, as we all know that. And so the only thing we can do that AI cannot do is, you know, the why not, right? So the craftsmanship is definitely crucial. And go back to the questions, like we need to be able to convince and educate the clients to pay for the craftsmanship. They need to see that. And the craftsmanship is not only in materials, it's in detailing, it's in, you know, all kind of things, in space making and all of that. And, you know, I obviously learned a lot about concrete from Ando, and, you know, in a way, I try not to just do that because I can do that quite well. So leading back to your second question, I think when you look at concrete, you know, in a very philosophical, special sense, concrete has been since Roman time, right? I think every architect has used it, even before modern. And Ando, in a way, because he's so decisive that he doesn't use anything else, so it makes it very clear. His concrete is beautiful because he pays attention to the workers. And for me, there's a few things that are interesting about that. Number one is that when you look at concrete, for example, you look at Le Corbusier, you look at Luca, you look in Ando, the concrete are very different. It talks about different spirit. Corbusier doesn't really care about what concrete looks like because his vision is universal. He wants to design a building that can be built anywhere. He doesn't rely on craftsmanship. He just wants the ambition to be global. Kahn, in another way, you know, is really related in a classical sense. Ando's concrete is very Japanese, even though he built outside of Japan now, because I don't want to bore you, but the modules of the formwork and the mix is very different. Construction in Japan is very human. There's no cranes, everything is carried by human. So the plywood size that used for the concrete in Japan is 90 centimeters by 180, which is the size of the tatami mat, which is the modular construction in Japan. Whereas in America, it's 1.2 by 2.4, right? So it becomes 90 cents and 180 is thin enough for one person to carry. But because of that, it's very thin. So when you pour the concrete, it has the texture. This is not intentional. It's just because of construction technique, because one person needs to be able to carry that. So the plywood is quite thin and smaller. And so it meets with the Japanese scale. But the same thing, if you look at concrete in America, whether it's Lucan or Ando or even on my own work, the module is 1.2 by 2.4, and the plywood is very thick. So it cannot be carried by humans. It has to be craned into one another, just like what you see over there. So it has a very smooth, precise way comparing to Japanese concrete. I don't think one is better than the other, even though, you know, there are clients that I know who would say, oh, we would like our concrete to have this pillow kind of thing like you have in Japan. I felt like it's an alien concept because if you cook something, it should reflect the place that you're cooking it at. So if you make concrete in in America, it should be American. It should have the spirit of the place. And I know that very well because I work on many projects for Anto and for myself in any place from Japan, America, France, Italy, Germany, and Asia and others. And every time I have to go around and work with the workers to build it up. But the goal is not trying to meet an ideal in Japan. The goal is trying to work with the local workers to develop the best thing we can do together at a particular site. So that's kind of the cooking concept, because you have to start from the chef and the ingredients you have in each particular location and bring it up to the highest level.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Я позволю себе задать последний, the last question from me. Последний вопрос этой конференции.
The last question of the conference will be quite a cliche, maybe, but since you are the closing performer, please answer the question. Who is the future architect? Who is the architect of the future? Describe him or her.
I think the future of the profession, I see architect as not a politician, but someone who is able to engage with people at large, like a ringleader, or someone that can really use their skills in planning and designing, but not to do your own little vision, but using that to show everyone what could be done together and create a consensus, create an agreement out of it. And I felt that that is the future of architecture, because architecture is not a personal matter. It is a public matter. And unless you have a public mind and willing to engage with public discourses, it will be a very obsolete position. And I want it to be not that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Эти аплодисменты.
This round of applause is for you.
Мы завершаем нашу конференцию.
And we conclude the conference,
Я хочу сказать
Future
еще
Architect
раз спасибо
Conference.
нашему
I would like to
стратегическому
once
партнеру,
more
с которым
thank
мы делаем
our
уже второй
dearest
год
strategic
программу
partner,
«Архитектор
which
РФ»,
hosts this
образовательную программу
conference
для
and
статусных
education programs
архитекторов
together with
всей
us,
России.
Dom RF, our strategic
Прием
partner.
заявок на
And the
эту
applications
конференцию,
for the
на эту
conference are
программу
now
открываются уже 20
open.
сентября. И мы рады объявить это на этой конференции. Я также хочу поблагодарить вас, дорогие зрители, за ваши вопросы, которые вы присылали. Их было более 100.
I would like to thank
И нам было действительно сложно
the
их
audience
выбирать,
for
и
your
были
questions.
заданы
It was
многие.
hard to pick the best.
Я хочу поблагодарить команду
I would like to
Института
thank the
Strelka,
team
которая
of Strelka
собирала
Institute
эту
who put
конференцию.
together
Давайте
this
поаплодируем.
tremendous band of speakers.
Это на самом деле очень большая команда,
And the
без
team
которой
that
бы
worked
не случилась
to
эта программа.
arrange
Спасибо большое.
the
Оставляйте
conference
ваши
is really
отзывы
big,
по
by the way.
хэштегам «Архитектор
And please
будущего
don't
2019»
hesitate to leave your
Strelka
feedback
Summer
about the
X.
conference
Мы
and
будем
use the
очень
hashtags.
ждать, следить
We're
и
looking
делать
forward
нашу
to your
конференцию
feedback
еще
so that
лучше
we could
до
make the
встречи в
conference
следующем
even
году.
better.
Пока.
And see you again next year. Goodbye. Thank you.